I thought it would be interesting to do a quick post-mortem of that recent 5-minute game. So the opponent just played f4, and I was wondering after, actually, was g4 the correct move in this position? Or maybe it was best not to allow this pawn to control g3, maybe take and allow the pawn fracture. Apparently g4 is liked. G takes is not so hot, apparently, even though my king seems to have access to g3. But this does look easier to play, actually. I mean, I'm not really sure that the structural damage is that significant. But say black wins this pawn, then it's I don't know, it's going to be tricky. So it should be about equal anyway. He's got access to play h4 check anyway here. So what I played, actually, make sure the rook at least is cut off from controlling h4, and I thought intuitively that king g2 to f3, but of course he stopped that. So we have this position where for some reason it looks tricky to play, because my rook is in front of the pawn. It doesn't really want to be in front of the pawn. Maybe that's why that's saying rook's supposed to be behind pawns, so you can still push them to the queening square, but the rook's in front of it and he's got his rook behind it, so he's got a position easier to play, it seems. And his next move carries with it some ideas that the king can actually walk up now to g5 and support h5 to try and undermine my pawn structure and weaken this g pawn. And if I ever play f3, then there's horrible checks on the second row. So the thing which I'm seeing here from this post-mortem analysis is actually, in this position, this rook is kind of tying down the king to f6, that responsibility of taking care of the f6 pawn. And so this next move, from that kind of perspective, means now the king is free to move now and not tied down to f6. But I suppose you could argue the king's tied down to h7, but he's going to play h5 anyway. So of the two pawns to tie the black king down, I think leaving the rook on d6 looks maybe better. Apparently it's better just to play h4, and of course that does rule out h5 now, because I could just take, and he's tied down to f6, so if he plays king h6 I can just take and end up being potentially two pawns up, so that would be quite kind of pleasant, and maybe he would have agreed to draw there. But the way I played it, I was going in time trouble as well, but I drove the king up and I'm now facilitating h5 after this h4 move. So this h4 is just asking for h5. If I try and hold steady with rook d8, so that things like f5, king can come up, and it still looks tricky to play with limited time, actually. If I have to lose this pawn, okay, that at least I'll be getting a better position in the game. But it's getting to be a small advantage window here. For example, like this, it's just a small advantage window. The king is very active, mine is a bit more passive. So it's going to be a draw, I would expect. So if we go back, I had played h4, which asked for h5, and now this is getting tricky because my h pawn, and even though he's got the wretched double pawns, my pawns are not amazing either, and I'm kind of tied down. He refused the draw repetition here by going king g4, which apparently gives me a tiny advantage after what I played f3. Check. No, I've already misplayed that here. f3, and I should have played rook d7 here. So he might have a hard time winning this if I just play here. Basically, how is he making progress? I've got the outside h pawn. So if I can give that up for the outside h pawn, should be a draw, one would expect. Draw. I get my king up. I use the pawn as a decoy, and it's going to be a draw. Okay, right. So if we go back, in the game it started to get quite tricky because even here I was equal though. I'm unequal on pawns. I shouldn't really have lost this game. It's just a lot of time pressure to deal with as well. So rook f3, I play king g2, and again it's equal according to analysis here. So even here it looks bad that I'm losing f3, but you know, he's got double pawn, so apparently either check or h5 is still equal. But this one is apparently questionable, this check here. So he starts to actually be doing well after that. So let's see, h5 as an alternative and losing f3. So king can either go to g2 or h4. Say the rook moves here, h6. If he tries to stop the pawn like this, then king f3. And okay, if his king gets cut off here, it's very, very clear cut to draw. So in the game, yeah, I managed to make things difficult really with this check here. So all of a sudden black is slightly better, and my position is actually getting worse and worse now. He's actually managed to find a way to increase his advantage. Actually, after this move, apparently again it went to equal. Funny enough. So what is going on here, you might ask? Basically, I just carry on checking, and if he ever like moves off, say with this, then I just take and I get this drawn position where it's a simple king and pawn ending draw. So okay, so I messed that up, but it's just basically it's like a time pressure win. But it seemed as though I made some extra difficulties there, but I just wanted to really check, was this g4 a good move? Apparently it was okay, g4, in case you were wondering about that particular game. G4 is like apparently a good move here, not g takes, even though you might think, well, the f pawn was a pain. It was, but otherwise the rook's given access to h4 to supporting h5, h4, you know, maybe stuff like that. And here, you know, the king going to f3 was a threat. It's just some subtleties here to maybe bear in mind. I made things more difficult by not keeping the rook attacking f6 here. So responsibilities of the king maybe is emphasised here. The transposition into drawn king and pawn endings, stuff like that. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.